All right, let's talk about one of the biggest, most important ideas in all of science, evolution by natural selection. Now, this is the story of how every single living thing on this planet is connected. If you stick with me, you're going to see exactly how this amazing process works. So let's dive in. You ever just stop and look around and just wonder, how did we get all of this? I mean, from tiny little microbes you can't even see, all the way up to massive blue whales. Why are there just so many different ways to be alive? Well, believe it or not, that incredible question is exactly what the theory of evolution answers. So here's our game plan for figuring this out. We're going to break it down into four key parts. First, we'll look at life's incredible variety. That's the raw material. Then we'll get into the blueprint of life and see how traits get passed on. After that, we'll fire up the engine of it all, survival of the fittest. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at the big picture. Okay, part one, life's incredible variety. And here's the most important thing to get your head around right at the start. For evolution to even begin, you have to have differences. Think about it. If every single organism in a species was a perfect clone, there'd be literally nothing for nature to select from. So variation is ingredient number one. So where does all this variety come from? Well, it pretty much boils down to two main things. First up is sexual reproduction. You can think of this like shuffling two decks of genetic cards, one from each parent, to deal a brand new, completely unique hand for the offspring. The second source is mutation. This is a totally random, spontaneous change in the DNA. It's like a little typo in the giant recipe book of life. Now, most of these typos don't do much, but every once in a while, a typo accidentally creates something new and brilliant. All right, on to our second section. It's great to have all this variety, right? But for any of it to matter in the long run, those different traits have got to be heritable. They need to be passed down from one generation to the next. And that's all about inheritance. And at the very heart of inheritance is this amazing molecule, DNA. The best way to picture it is like a giant recipe book that's tucked inside almost every single one of your cells. It's got all the instructions needed to build and run, well, you. So if DNA is the entire recipe book, then a gene is like one single recipe inside that book. It's a specific chunk of DNA that carries the instructions for one particular thing, like the recipe for your eye color or the recipe for your blood type. And this is where it gets really cool. For any one recipe or gene, there can be different versions. We call these versions alleles. So for the eye color gene, there's an allele for brown eyes, an allele for blue, an allele for green, and so on. This right here is the genetic source of all that variation we were just talking about. So how do these alleles get shuffled around and passed on? Well, our cells have two ways of dividing. On the one hand, you have mitosis, which is basically a biological photocopier. It makes identical cells so you can grow and repair yourself. But the real star of the show for evolution is meiosis. This is a special kind of division that happens for reproduction. It shuffles up the parents' alleles to create totally unique sex cells, which guarantees variety in every new generation. Okay, so we've got variation and we've got a way to pass it down. Now we get to the main event, survival of the fittest. This is the mechanism, the powerful engine that actually drives all evolutionary change. You see, the reality for pretty much every organism out there is that life is a competition. There just aren't enough resources to go around. Not enough food, not enough mates, not enough space. This creates what we call a struggle for existence. And that struggle leads straight to natural selection. We can break it down into 5 basic steps. 1, we know there's variation in any population. 2, an environmental pressure hits. Maybe it gets colder or a new predator shows up. 3, because of that variation, some individuals just happen to have alleles that give them a slight advantage in this new situation. 4, because they're better suited, they're more likely to survive long enough to have kids. And 5, the crucial bit, they pass those winning alleles on to their offspring. Then the cycle starts all over again. A good way to think about it is that the environment acts like a filter. It's not actively choosing winners and losers. It just creates conditions where some individuals, with their particular traits, are more likely to make it through and reproduce, while others, not so much. And this is a super important point, a really common misunderstanding. Fitness in evolution doesn't mean you're the strongest or the fastest. It just means you're the best fit for your specific current environment. A penguin is incredibly fit for life in the freezing Antarctic, but it would be hopelessly unfit in the middle of the Sahara Desert. It's all about context. So, what happens when this engine of natural selection is left running? for a really, really long time. Well, that brings us to our final section, the big picture, the grand outcome of it all. Over many, many generations, the result of that five-step cycle is that those advantageous alleles, the ones that help with survival, they just become more and more common in the population. The genetic makeup of the entire group slowly but surely begins to shift.
And you have to remember, evolution plays the ultimate long game. This is not about changes you can see in a single lifetime. We're talking about tiny, tiny advantages building up over thousands, or even millions of generations, until the species itself has been completely reshaped.
And when these gradual changes pile up for long enough, a population can become so different from its distant ancestors that we consider it an entirely new species. This whole process, called speciation, is how we ended up with the millions of different species we see on Earth today. It's the big payoff.
So let's just boil it all down one last time. It's a four-part story, really. Variation provides the raw material, inheritance is the system for passing traits down, natural selection is the mechanism that filters them, and over huge stretches of time, the result is evolution. Simple as that.
And I'll just leave you with this one last thought. We've been talking about natural selection, right? But what happens when the biggest environmental pressure is us? From changing the climate to overusing antibiotics, humans are now the single biggest selective force on the planet. This is evolution happening on our watch, and we're the ones driving it. Something to think about. Thanks for